Alright YouTube, welcome back to another weekly NFL predictions video. We're on week 3 of the 2018 season now, let's get started. First up we got the New York Jets going against the Cleveland Browns, the still winless Browns. Sam Darnold came a little bit back down to earth last week. He didn't look too bad, but he didn't look as phenomenal as he did week 1. And the Browns continue to get in their own way. They had a win against the Saints locked up and ready, but managed to find a way to give it away late. I think they win this game. I think that defense frustrates Sam Darnold enough, and I think Tyrod Taylor makes just enough plays. Getting rid of Josh Gordon will hurt a little bit, but I think this will be one of those Jarvis Landry 10-catch, 80-yard, 2-touchdown type of games. Let's say the Browns get their first win in 2 years now. 2 years and some change, 24-17. Moving on, we got the surprisingly disappointing New Orleans Saints taking on the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints were a very popular Super Bowl pick this year after the way the defense showed up last year and how they were able to run the ball to complement Drew Brees. This year they got exploded on by Ryan Fitzpatrick, and the defense has been getting shredded. And they nearly lost to the Browns last week. They really didn't beat the Browns beat themselves. And Atlanta bounced back after a tough first week against Philly to beat Carolina. This is a tough one. I just think the Saints match up really well with the Falcons. I think Marshawn Lattimore starts to look like that stud corner he was last year. Drew Brees is going to do Drew Brees things. Alvin Kamara is going to do his thing. I think it'll be a heavy shootout. Let's go 35-31. The Saints start to look a little bit better. Next, we got the immortal man himself, Aaron Rodgers, taking on the Washington Redskins. Much like how the Steelers and the Browns tied in Week 1, that was more of a neither team deserved to win. Where when Green Bay and Minnesota played, neither team deserved to lose, so it ended up in a tie. Mason Crosby did miss that game-winning field goal attempt, but he's made plenty of other ones before. It happens. The Redskins, after a dominant first week against the Cardinals, they looked pretty mediocre against the Colts. Their defense really got pieced up most of the time, minus a couple of interceptions. And on offense, they could not move the ball. They moved decently between the 20s, but they had nothing for the red zone. And the Colts defense isn't exactly a stone wall. It's hard for me not to see even a 70% Aaron Rodgers not putting 30 up on this team. And I have very limited faith that Alex Smith is going to be able to counter anything. So let's look at something like 38-18. Green Bay rolls them. Speaking of the Colts, they're coming off their first win and their best record in over 3 years this far into the season. And they're going to have to take on the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And even on top of that, the British prince known as Carson Wentz is supposedly going to return for this game as well. I think his return being his first game back will kind of close the gap a little bit. He'll start a little slow. Maybe not quite be the same MVP superstar we saw him at the end of last year. So I think that'll help kind of close the gap a little bit. I'm looking at maybe 28-20. The Eagles still pull it off. They just have entirely too much talent. Indianapolis is still rebuilding. I think it's a nice showcase of two of the younger future of the league quarterbacks. And I think Philadelphia's pass rush is just going to overwhelm the Colts' young offensive line. Next up, we got the disappointing Buffalo Bills taking on the 1-0-1 Vikings. So this is a contrast of teams, if you will. The Bills are in full rebuild mode. Not a whole lot to expect this year. They're just trying to basically get some reps under all their young guys' belts. The Vikings, they have to win now. Otherwise, they wasted a whole lot of money on Kirk Cousins and Sheldon Richardson and all those guys. The Bills have not looked good thus far in the season. They honestly look like probably the worst team in the league. And the Vikings, they've looked very good for the most part. Against Green Bay, it's hard to look perfect against Aaron Rodgers, even when he's hobbled. This game, I say Minnesota rolls them 30-10. Bills just won't have any answers. They'll get some garbage time yards and maybe a touchdown, but this will be all Vikings all day. Next, we got the John Gruden-led Oakland Raiders taking on the surprisingly 2-0 Miami Dolphins. The Raiders have been a pretty big disappointment as well, like the Bills. They haven't lost badly, but they've lost games they should win. And since they traded Khalil Mack, their defense has showed even less than they saw last year. Case Keenum led that game-winning drive and basically got him an extra point attempt field goal at the end of the game. And week 1, after a strong first half against the Rams, they got bombarded in the second half. I just think John Gruden's a little in over his head right now, and I don't think the talent quite can make up for it. I'm still a fan of Derek Carr's, but I just don't think they have the structure around him to succeed. Doug Martin, Marshawn Lynch, your running backs combined are like 65 years old. Jordy Nelson's not the same Jordy Nelson. Still effective, but he's not giving you what Crabtree is giving you. Amari Cooper's really nice. It was nice to see him come back last week with another 10-catch game. And then the Dolphins, they're surprisingly 2-0. I didn't think they were going to be one of the better teams this year. Getting rid of Jarvis Landry, Ndamukong Suh, Jay Ajayi last year during the season. And I think this is kind of where it's going to end. I think this will be a game where Derek Carr manages to throw for 3 touchdowns, 300 yards. In spite of Gruden, what looks to be inept halftime adjustments going to second halves. I think Derek Carr will be enough to win this game. I mean, he had 3 incompletions last week against Denver's defense. So let's look at something like 27-18 Oakland wins. Next, we got those Broncos that are also 2-0 for the 6th straight year. 6 straight years of starting a season 2-0. That's crazy. Going against the recently bombarded on Baltimore Ravens. They got shot by the Red Rifle last week. I don't think anyone really saw that coming the way it played out. Andy Dalton looked absolutely sensational. I mean, minus 1 bad pass that he threw, he lit it up all night long. A.J. Green got more red zone touchdowns than Julio Jones gets all season. I don't know why, but that's just the way it works. And Denver, while they struggled early, Derek Carr kind of pieced up that secondary. Case Keenum led a game-winning comeback drive at the end of the game. He's kind of providing exactly what they need. He's not going to score a lot of points, but when you need to make a few plays, he's capable of making them. Maybe not some Minnesota Miracle plays, but I think that trend continues, and we see a 3-0 Denver team and probably one of the better defensive games we've had so far this year. I'm looking at 18-10. I think Flacco throws a couple rough picks. Case Keenum does what he does, where he throws a pick early, but he wins with a touchdown late. 18-10. They'll go 18-14, actually. Change that just a little bit. So 18-14, Denver wins. Next, we got the Cincinnati Bengals that are 2-0 under Andy Dalton, taking on the Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton looked absolutely fantastic against that Baltimore defense. 4 touchdowns. He found A.J. Green. He found Tyler Eifert a little bit. He found Tyler Kroft. He found all of his weapons. But Joe Mixon is out for a couple weeks with that knee surgery. And the Panthers, they had a bit of a setback against the Falcons, but the Falcons are a team that just matches up with them year in and year out, it seems. I think this will be one where Carolina looks really, really good, and I think they'll play a little bit above how good they will be, kind of like what they did against the Patriots last year. Just one of those games where Cam Newton looks sensational. Christian McCaffrey's going to have another 14-catch, 20-carry type of game. I'm going to go Carolina 27, Cincinnati 24. I think not having Joe Mixon will hurt Cincinnati in the later parts of the game. Next, we got the very disappointingly 0-2 New York Giants taking on the equally disappointing 0-2 Texans. Both of these teams were supposed to be sleeper playoff contenders. Saquon Barkley was the sensational running back prospect that was going to change them. Nate Solder was going to shore up the offensive line. Odell getting his money. He was going to light the league up. Deshaun Watson, some people had as an MVP candidate after 6 games, which was just ridiculous. Whitney Merciless, J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, one of the best defenses you could ever assemble. And it just hasn't clicked for either team. That said, Houston has looked a little bit better in their losses. Like Dallas's defense just absolutely assaulted Eli Manning in that offensive line. It looked like anytime he didn't throw a quick check down to Saquon Barkley, he was getting blasted. Odell was virtually eliminated without even really being double-teamed or anything. He just didn't have time to get any routes going. And Deshaun Watson looked pretty good in the second half against New England, and he had his moments against Tennessee, but he doesn't look like that rookie that took over the league last year. He does throw the same kind of picks that he threw, just not as much voluminous touchdowns that he had last year. I do think, that being said, that he will have enough for this game to beat the Giants. I think that pass rush with Merciless and Waddle start to look like what everyone expected them to. Not necessarily because of them, but because that Giants offensive line is still pretty mediocre at best. We'll go 27-17 Houston, and not really a pretty game, just kind of a they match up better in certain aspects. Next up, we got an AFC South battle as the Tennessee Titans take on the 2-0 Jacksonville Jaguars. Tennessee looked really, really good last week against the Texans. With Marcus Mariota out, that fake punt for a touchdown, the defense played pretty strong. They ran the ball to control it. They might honestly be better when Mariota's out of the lineup, as weird as that is. He seems to turn the ball. He's had a few issues turning the ball over the last few years, and he doesn't provide the same explosive plays. I know they were in the playoffs last year, but that was almost kind of by default with all the injuries in the AFC. And they looked like trash in the playoffs. I mean, they didn't really beat Kansas City. Alex Smith kind of beat Kansas City last year with his inability to push the ball. And then Jacksonville, on the other hand, is coming off one of their biggest regular season wins in recent memory. Excuse me. When they actually not only beat the Patriots, but they really blew them out. Those 2 late touchdowns to Chris Hogan were just kind of garbage time. They made the score look a little closer than it really was. Jacksonville absolutely dominated that game. And I expect them to carry that momentum over into this week. I think Keelan Cole's going to continue that momentum. Blake Bortles is. I think they're going to win this one really comfortably around 38-16. Look for that defense to get after Blaine Gabbert and just absolutely eliminate Derrick Henry. Next up, we got Jimmy Garoppolo's 49ers taking on the unbelievably explosive Kansas City Chiefs. Jimmy Garoppolo and those 49ers got their first win of the season last week against the Detroit Lions, but it wasn't exactly the best performance. They kind of dodged a few bullets. Jimmy threw a really bad interception towards the end of the game. And Kansas City's coming off an absolute offensive showcase against the Steelers. They did give up over 37 or 38 points, I think it was. But that was kind of just, when you give the Steelers offense the ball that much, it's going to happen. Patrick Mahomes had 6 touchdowns and only 5 incompletions. He had more touchdowns and incompletions over a 4-quarter game. And that was without Kareem Hunt really going off for he had a good game, but he didn't have one of those crazy Kareem Hunt type games. It's hard to see Kansas City's momentum stopping here. Last year they kind of had the same start to the season, but this just feels different. Last year it kind of felt a little fluky. It just felt like, oh, look at this really good start. No one knew what to expect. Kareem Hunt came out of nowhere. Travis Kelce established himself as the second best tight end in the league. Tyreek Hill was the ultimate explosive nuclear weapon. Now you add all of that on top of with Sammy Watkins on top of that, and a ridiculously naturally gifted passer in Patrick Mahomes who's not scared at all. He will try and throw into a triple covered window because he knows he can get it in there. Let's look at Kansas City to win 28-20. I don't think they explode like they did last week. Patrick Mahomes looks a little more human, but this is where Kareem Hunt will start to mix in a little bit and kind of right the ship a little bit. This will be more of the team we see throughout the year. And then the battle for Los Angeles is our next game as the Chargers take on the Rams. The Chargers got their win last week against the Bills. Once again, a poor rookie quarterback for the Bills has to get his first career start against that Chargers pass rush. And LA handled it. They handled them pretty comfortably. There wasn't much in doubt. They're still one of the most talented teams in the league in spite of the injuries, and I think they're going to have a strong rest of the season. The Rams absolutely eliminated the Cardinals from any chance of being decent this year with a 34-0 shutout. This game has the potential to be a real classic on the season, one of those that we remember, that we look back on this season, but yep, that was a game that sticks out. But I think it could also be a real stinker too, unfortunately. I think I don't know if it's going to have any in between. It's either going to be a classic or an absolute dud. I'm going to lean towards a classic and say both offenses absolutely show up. The defenses, when they get takeaways, their key takeaways, their pick sixes, their forced fumbles. I'm going with 28-27. The Rams pull it off late. I'm thinking a fourth quarter go-ahead touchdown to win the game. Next up, we got the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Dallas had a really, really rough week 1, but they bounced back strong last week in week 2 against the Giants, mostly on defense where they absolutely obliterated the Giants' offensive game plan. And on offense, the Cowboys, they kind of did what they had to do. They had one kind of, I don't want to say fluky, but they had one big play to Tavon Austin, Then the rest of the time, they basically killed the clock. They avoided letting Dak really do anything besides hand the ball off and run it himself, which is when he's at his best. And Ezekiel got a decent amount of carries. I think he got about 19 or 20, which is where you'll want to get him. And the Seahawks, they unfortunately ran into the buzzsaw that is the Chicago Bears defense. With Khalil Mack getting more and more comfortable, he absolutely wrecked that game and is clearly the head for Defensive Player of the Year. Will Dissly's looked like an outstanding addition to the Seahawks offense, and I think he's going to make some noise in this game, but it's hard to pick against the Cowboys after how Seattle looked. They got injuries with Doug Baldwin, Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright. Shaquem Griffin's not getting a whole lot of playing time. I'm not sure why. I saw somewhere that said he didn't look too good week one. So I'm going to say the Cowboys control this game and win pretty comfortably 21-14. I think Russell will get a late touchdown to get it within that score, but I think it's going to be Dallas's game to lose. Speaking of that buzzsaw Bears defense, they are going to take on the Arizona Cardinals, who have been not looking too hot. And Khalil Mack is he's a treat to watch. He got paid and managed to get better. He has wrecked every single offensive tackle, tight end, running back he's played so far. Roquan Smith finally got into the action a little bit more often last week, and he looks like he's going to be a stud. His range is fantastic. The Bears secondary, while it does give up some silly plays like Kyle Fuller cannot catch a pick to save his life, sometimes they get a little out of position. Most of the game, they're outstanding. Leonard Floyd's only getting better as his hand injury heals. Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman really control the line. This has Bears blowout written all over it. I'm not sure if Mitch Trubisky throw for a whole lot. I don't think this will be a showcase game for him. I'd like to see him throw more touchdowns, be a little more of a quarterback rhythm, move the ball type of guy. But I think they kind of run a fluky offense that fits him uses his mobility, and then getting him outside on the pocket, keeping on schedule Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. They have Allen Robinson. When they put him in the slot, he just gets open up the middle. He's a big guy, and they just can't seem to cover him, so I'm hoping they exploit more of that this game. We're going to go Bears 28, Cardinals 9. I just can't see the Cardinals getting in the end zone. And I know everyone wants to see Josh Rosen, but for the sake of his health, I hope this is not the week. Sam Bradford is not the best at staying healthy, but I don't think you would subject Josh Rosen to this. And for the Sunday night showcase, we got the New England Patriots taking on the Detroit Lions. The Patriots are coming off a surprisingly big shellacking at the hands of the Jaguars last week. The score showed they were within earshot, but really, when you watch the game, they had nothing going. They couldn't move the ball. They couldn't stop Blake Bortles. It was the kind of game that most people who hate New England wanted to see in the AFC title game last year. And it was the one Jaguar fans wish they would have saw. And the Lions, they just haven't looked too good this year. Stafford had a miserable week one. And last week they weren't able to capitalize on a late Jimmy G turnover. And there's been a little bit about questions about Matt Patricia as a head coach so far. I think that's going to lead to New England getting back on track against the Lions. Something around 28-18. 28-20, just to make an even number. And in the Monday night game, we got the tumultuous Pittsburgh Steelers taking on Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Magic Man himself. The Buccaneers are 2-0 against the Saints and the Eagles. Nobody before the season could have predicted that. And the Steelers are 0-1-1, getting blown back on defense by Patrick Mahomes and struggling so mightily to even tie with the Browns. Everything in me wants to pick the Steelers because this kind of reminds me of when they played the Chiefs last year, and the Chiefs were that team early in the year. And the Steelers have so much talent. I mean, James Washington is their third or fourth receiver who doesn't get a whole lot of burn. Juju Smith-Schuster got 11 catches last week. Antonio Brown wasn't even the main option. He was the third leading receiver on the team. But they've shown, I think Mike Tomlin's lost that team. I think Le'Veon Bell looks incredibly smart right now, just trying to get his money, because the Steelers do not want to pay him, and they do not look the same without him. And the defense looks nothing like it did last year. They got a bunch of sacks week one, but when they don't get those sacks, they get shredded. Fitzpatrick has found an amazing rapport with Deshaun Jackson, especially deep down the field when Fitzpatrick isn't known for having a rocket arm. Mike Evans, you can throw anything within 30 yards of him, he'll somehow be able to reach it. He's such a big body. Fitzpatrick's even got O.J. Howard in the mix, which is great to see because he's one of the more talented younger tight ends. I think the Buccaneers train is going to come to a halt, but it's not, and slow down a little bit, but it's not going to be this week. I think we're going to go 30-24. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers start the season 3-0. And going into next week, after suspension ends, Jameis Winston sitting on the bench and Fitzpatrick will continue to play. And that's all for this Week 3 NFL predictions. If you enjoy, please subscribe or follow my Twitter account where I'll post videos and other random opinions I have during sporting events. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.